The financial systems that talk about inclusion but deny access to earn income. Volunteering is not a substitute for a paycheck, and gratitude is not compensation. Welcome to the Restoration Exchange, Banking on Humanity, where we examine how systems either restore dignity or quietly strip it away. In our last episode, The Money Connection Nobody Addresses, we talked about something fundamental. People cannot be independent financially, emotionally, or socially if they're disconnected from money. Today, we're going one layer deeper because money doesn't disappear. It gets replaced with something else. And for those that are disabled, that replacement is often a phrase that sounds harmless, even generous. You could always volunteer. But when you listen closely, especially through lived experiences, it stops sounding supportive and starts sounding like a system protecting itself. Volunteering is extremely important in our society, and it means everything to the nonprofits that we're working with. But we need to stop and think about when systems pacify instead of pay. It is a hard truth about disability and work. Today, I am honored to welcome my guest, Nicholas Comstock. He wrote a piece that stopped me in my tracks, not because it was polite, but because it was honest, raw, and absolutely necessary. Nick, welcome.
Thank you, Janine. I'm so glad to be here with your community. We have a lot to talk about today, including that piece. So I'm looking forward to it.
So, in your article that you wrote, and actually it was a blog that was released last week or week before?
About 6 or 7 days ago.
Okay, sounds good. So when you released it, you asked a question that directly connects to the money conversation we refuse to have. Why are disabled adults expected to work for free to prove they're worthy of being paid? Because what I heard, your truth, is that you cannot talk about independence, you cannot talk about inclusion, you cannot talk about empowerment if people are denied the dignity of being paid for the value that they bring.
That's right. You can't. And I think one of the reasons that my post caught attention was not only from that opening question, but from the title line, which is Nick, you could always volunteer. I call bullshit. And I've been trying to find a job since I was 18 years of age. And from the very beginning, all the Voc rehab all the Voc rehab facilities that are responsible to help people with disabilities find jobs would always say to me, Nick, you could always volunteer. But it never even really got that far. And with everything else that I do, my podcast and everything else, it's about bringing people with disabilities from the back of the class to the front of the class. So we're going to dig much deeper into that today.
Thank you. And, one of the things that I think of is that sometimes, again, with good intentions, people are thinking that volunteering or proving yourself is valuable. However, it definitely can look like busy work. So what I'm hearing is that you need income, agency, and room, not just for your foot in the door, but your entire wheelchair.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people have said to me over the years is, Nick, try volunteering because once you get your foot in the door, maybe that'll give you a job, But here's the surprising thing, Janine. We don't even say this to 12-year-old kids who want a new gaming system. We say, parents say, if they're smart, instead of giving it to them right out, they say, okay, you want a new gaming system? Work for it. Go mow lawns, go rake leaves, go shovel snow. Nobody even tells a 12-year-old, you want a new game system? Okay, go volunteer for it and see if you get it that way. And
Right.
nobody says to an able bodied 30-year-old man or woman, we need to see you volunteer before we know that you will actually be a good worker. Now, maybe that would be a good quality to do for some caregivers, considering the fact that a lot of caregivers are crappy today. So
Right.
maybe that would be a good thing to do. Let's see if you can actually do this job before we waste our money and start paying you. Maybe that would be good in some aspects. But to be honest, in today's world, in the able body world, they don't do that. And why is that with people with disabilities? Well, it's because they're looking at us as a liability
Right.
instead of a person who has abilities that could really bring up the company morale and bring up, company sales, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is about who gets access to money and who is told to survive without it.
Yeah,
And that's not a personal failure. That's a systemic decision. That
yeah,
is something that is embedded in our society today. And the saying of, well, you can volunteer, which means you work for free and you got to prove your worth
yeah.
before we'll pay you. And in between, it sounds like what you're being told and what you hear is that you just need to accept the crumbs and call it an opportunity.
That's exactly what it says. And that's exactly what our United States government says to people with disabilities like me. That's what they've said forever. Back in 1989, Janine, some geniuses in Congress thought that $2,000 was enough for people with disabilities to live off of because they said they made it law that said we can't have anything over $2,000 in our bank account. We can't have any stocks, bonds, or mutual funds. You know, period, point blank. And so we are a society that is being discriminated against. Everybody else is allowed to have an American dream, but if you have a physical disability, nope, this is the shoestring we're going to keep you on. And if you want, the American dream, uh, sure, you can work, but we're not going to give you your benefits and we're going to punish you for it.
Right. So, can you recall when you realized that you weren't being offered a choice, but it was going to be the highest level of opportunity for you and what the systems will allow?
I can absolutely recall a choice where it was going to be the only opportunity for me, but it was actually a quite big opportunity that other people got that just weren't disabled, but able-bodied people already had this opportunity. So 8 years ago, back in 2018, actually the end of 2017, I was in Richland County, Ohio, which is about an hour from where I am now. I'm in Columbus now. And we have 88 county boards of developmental disabilities, which supplies the people with disabilities like myself with government services like home health care, home delivered meals, and so forth. And I was in Richland County at the time receiving those type of services. And at the end of 2017, I got a call from my case manager's supervisor. And by this time, I had really started getting involved in advocacy. I was on a human rights committee. I was on all kinds of different types of committees that were strictly volunteer. And so I got a call from the supervisor, and she said, Nick, I have to shut my door to talk to you. And at this time, I had become real outspoken. Everybody at Medicaid knew my name at the point, even in little Richland County. And so when she said, I need to close my door to talk to you, I'm thinking, oh God, what did I do now? Who did I piss off? Whose job is getting lost today because of what I said, or who reported me, whatever. So she said, no, it's nothing like that. She said, she said, as you know, Nick, at the beginning of the following year, we're having a new county superintendent come in to run the agency. And she would like you to be a member of our board of directors. And at the time, I was the first one to be receiving services from the County Board of Developmental Disabilities to be receiving services also while being on their board of directors. And now it's mandatory that it has to be put in place all across 88 counties. There either has to be a family member who has somebody receiving services, or there has to be somebody directly receiving services on each county board of developmental disabilities. I was the first one to do it before it was mandatory. And so it was a really big deal. It was also within the board's 50-year history that I was doing this. So I was making history. And when I got that call, Janine, I cried because I thought, wow, all my work is starting to pay off. Big people in power want to hear my voice. They want to know what is on my heart. They want to know what other people in my position are going through. And so I was really excited about that. And so we went through, I did the process, and one of the ways of the process was you had to go in and you had to have an executive session where the board would interview you. An executive session is where it's not open to the public, it's just the board members. So I went in, I did that interview, and they said, Nick, what would you like to accomplish if you were appointed to the board for a 4-year appointment? Because it was a 4-year appointment. It was actually a pretty big deal because you were appointed, at least I was appointed by the county commissioner. So this was a pretty big deal. And so they asked me, what would I like to accomplish? And I said, well, I want to give the agency a front row seat into what I, go through every day, what other people like myself go through every day. And I want to get better pay for caregivers and just all the things, better pay for caregivers, more visibility for people who receive services from the agency and abroad. And they all said, that's wonderful. That's great. So we go through all that. I was appointed on January 24th, 2018. That was my first official board meeting. That was also the day that I was sworn in. And shortly after that, it was such a big deal. It made all the front page papers, Columbus Dispatch, the Richland County papers. It made local television. It made it all the way down to Marion, Ohio. Everybody knew, at least in the state, my name. They knew Nicholas Comstock's name. I remember my dad, who had a FedEx route as a courier down in Marion at the time, called me and was like, "Hey, I just heard your name on the radio. They're talking about your appointment. That's cool." And I was like, "Damn, that is cool." So it was a real big thing. And so a few weeks after doing that media tour, because everybody's asking me the same thing, what do you want to accomplish? I said, I would say the same thing. So I went into the superintendent and I said, what else do I tell these people? because they keep asking me, like, what do I want to do? What are my goals for the board? Blah, blah, blah. And this is when I knew that I was a token. She said to me, Nick, you can't have an opinion as a board member. And I was like, excuse me, what?
Yeah.
She was like, yeah, you can't have an opinion as a board member. You can't advocate as a board member. You're just a board member. And I was like, well, then why the hell am I here? And I struggled with that for a very, very long time. I think I completed my very first year on the board and I struggled the entire time. Met one of my best friends that I have to this day. But I did. I struggled for an entire year because I thought literally all I was worth to them was a front page story. And, the whole state got to see how Richland County's Board of Developmental Disabilities was being inclusive and including one of their people on their board of directors. But I was told I couldn't have an opinion, and I really struggled. So I moved to Columbus a year later and then started working on things. And here I am today with other projects and things in the mix.
And well, you point out something that is so powerful. Um, what do you think that reveals about how disabled adults are viewed in our economic system?
It reveals, period, point blank, that our able bodied counterparts don't trust us. They don't trust us in positions of power. They don't trust that paying us every 2 weeks is going to pay off.
Right.
They think that we're fragile. They think that we are a liability, and if something happens on their dime at the job with our health, we're automatically going to sue them. Which I can't speak for everybody in my position, but I'm not too happy. And I know there are plenty of people with disabilities that I talk to on my podcast, Nick Speaks, that would love the opportunity to work. They just haven't been given that opportunity
Right.
because employers are focused not on our abilities, but they're focused not necessarily on our disability either. They're focused on one thing: liability.
So they're asking, or the question appears to be always what can go wrong
Yeah.
versus reframing the conversation about what can go right. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Oh, 100%. 100%. But you got to think, if you're going to ask that about people with disabilities, you need to start asking that about your able-bodied employees,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
your able-bodied employees call off, you know, these days if they have a broken nail or they need a mental health day. What the hell is that? Like, I struggle with mental health. Okay, I get it. And I'm not making fun of anybody. I'm not doing that. But the culture that I grew up in, you went to work when you were dealing with depression. You went to work when things weren't right at home because you realized you still had a job to do. You still had to eat. You still had a family to provide for, even though they were annoying the hell out of you. So the idea of, oh, I need a mental health day because my job or my kids are too much, that's just crazy to me. And I'm telling you right now, if employers really gave disabled people a chance, I say this all the time on my TikToks and on my podcast, that if employers really gave disabled people a chance, you would have some of the hardest working people I believe employers would ever see. Not to say that a disabled employee isn't going to fail you like someone else. Sure, they could. If you stopped giving an able-bodied person a chance because The other ones you hired always ended up with their head in the toilet the next day instead of at their office. You would never hire anybody.
That's true. That's true. In your blog, Nick, you wrote that the system isn't broken because it lacks resources, but because it doesn't care enough to fix itself. What would caring enough actually look like in paid measurable outcomes?
Caring enough would look like, hey, um, let's actually fix this thing and not worry about being so fiscally responsible that we don't fix what we need to fix. It's the people at the top that are getting paid the big money, while the people at the bottom, the disabled, are, being told we have to be careful with your waiver services. Just because you have this much money to use doesn't mean we get to use it. Okay, well then why is that money there?
Right,
Why are you allotting me, for example, my waiver services are $500,000 a year. Now, really, there's no cap on those waiver services, but that's the highest amount of money that anyone can get in the state of Ohio on the program that I'm on. And I hear it all the time. Just because you receive $500,000 a year for services does not mean that we can use all that money. Well, then my question is, why can't we use all that money? Because all it's going to do is just sit there anyway.
right. And Nick, help me understand when you talk about your services, that includes what else that all include for you?
So that includes home health care services, that ability for home health care agencies to pay their staff, the ability for home health care agencies to transport me where I need to go. I'm given a certain amount of mileage every month, which is very good. The mileage that I'm giving to go places,
Right,
very good. Um, so it it pays for my 24/7 care, and all that stuff. But if people would stop trying to hold so tightly or clutch their pearls, as a lot of people say, if people would stop clutching so hard onto their pearls and actually use the pearls, aka money, you
right,
really see some big job development for people with disabilities. Or here's an idea, better care.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you hit on something. Um, so what kinds of work and leadership do you think would emerge if systems stopped demanding gratitude in those, crumbs and started really recognizing the value that you can bring to the table?
Oh my God, Janine, the disabled economy would boom. Probably the able body economy too. Um, if we stopped being so scared, I wouldn't say we because I'm not. If if employers would stop being so scared to hire people with disabilities, they could eventually become CEOs of Fortune 500 companies.
Wow.
They could eventually become mayors of their city, governors. I mean, look at Governor Greg Abbott in Texas. He's about ready
Right.
to start his third term. I mean, but even if, they didn't become, even if they didn't aspire to do that, that would say a whole lot on the employer's perspective of, you know what, I gave this person a chance and this is how my company morale soared, you
Right.
know, and it would cause able-bodied employees to say, look at what they're doing. I need to speed up my game to keep up with them. And if we were given real opportunities and a real seat at the table, um, boardrooms could be changed forever.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree with you. It the what I love about our conversation, Nick, and I so appreciate your transparency and your courage and bravery to talk this frankly about how things are working in your world. And, through this podcast and what I believe is that dignity begins with access to opportunity, to income, and to systems designed for the whole human being. So when we think about our commitment to economic justice and we go beyond slogans, to me, that's where we're connecting this directly back to my previous podcast about the money connection nobody addresses,
Yeah,
because we talked about financial independence to treat like a personal virtue while access to money is tightly controlled. It's just exactly what you said.
yes,
Telling disabled adults to volunteer instead of paying them kind of does the same thing. Would you agree with that?
absolutely. Because a lot of employers are, focused on making sure that people with disabilities don't lose their benefits. And I feel like that's also where a lot of disability advocacy is wasted. And
Right.
how can we get more from the government but have less control? Well, breaking news, Fox News alert, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because let me give it to you this way. Say a 35-year-old woman or man is living at home with their parents, and their parents are footing the bill for everything. I mean, they're paying for groceries, they're not charging their kid rent, everything. But that kid wants the ability to go do whatever they want to do, and they don't want their parents to say anything. You can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't have your girlfriend or boyfriend over. And then the kid wants to come around and say, well, I'm an adult. Don't tell me what to do, but pay my bills. No, that's not how this works. That's not
Right.
how this works. And you can't ask the government to give more of the people's tax dollars away when and but yet you want more freedom. Now, do I agree that we need to up the $2,000 asset limit? Absolutely, because that's ridiculous. Nobody who is able bodied can live on $2,000. So why are they expecting us to? We can't have anything over $2,000. I want to make that clear. We can have a house, we can have a car. That's it. But we can't have anything else over $2,000.
So,
So
Nick, is that 2000? Sorry for the interruption. Is that $2,000 per month?
that's $2,000 period.
Really?
Yeah. So what I'm saying to you is if Social Security notices that say they notice that I have $4,000 in my account, they're not going to immediately take my benefits away, but they're going to say, and they're going to start putting me under surveillance. They're going to say, you need to go on a spin down with that money because you're not allowed to have anything over $2,000. And then they're going to start asking you, okay, when did that money come in? Did you get an inheritance? Are you working? So, yeah, you can't have anything over $2,000 in your account at all, which is going to have to change very soon because with the cost of living adjustment going up every year, I get close to $1,000 as it is every month anyway.
Right.
So they need to change that amount. I'm getting ready to interview somebody on my podcast from the UK, and they were telling me that they're not allowed to have anything over $8,000 in their account. Um, and there was a bill that was supposed to be going around to replace it to from 2000 to 10,000. I don't know what happened to that bill, but honestly, I think it needs to be more than 2,000. I think it at least needs to be, the average person can make at a job $40,000 a year. So I think that it should be a $40,000 savings cap with a substantial cost of living adjustment. And let me say this as well. When you give us the cost of living adjustment, United States government, it doesn't really help because you take it away in other ways. Our rent goes up, our food stamps go down, you know. So you give us this cost of living adjustment and expect us to celebrate, but then all it does is leave us exactly where we've started. We're still trying to catch up. We still don't have enough to pay our bills. We still don't have enough to have fun or go on vacation.
Right. So, Nick, that seems to be where how can you be independent? And you're looking to contribute to society and to the economy, but, people are not necessarily wanting to hire you and see the value that you bring to the table and be paid for it. So, when would you ever be independent?
Well, that's good that you bring that up. So, from the Labor Department, a statistic from 2023 that I was given is that 22% of people with disabilities are gainfully employed. I am not one of those 22%. I was actually told, Nick, there's nothing you can offer an employer. I'm looking at you in the world of work, which I don't know what the hell that means. How can you look at me in the world of work if I've never been in the world of work? Um, so how can disabled people become more independent and give yourself a chance? Become entrepreneurials. That's what I've had to do. Because I've been told on multiple occasions that I have nothing to offer an employer. And they made me go through all kinds of tests, putting pegs in a board the size of a grain of rice. Janine, I can barely hold my phone some days.
Yeah.
They wanted me to put a bunch of pegs in a board in a timely manner. They wanted me to uh, move my foot around on a pedal to move an arrow around a screen, which none of this had anything to do with employment. Nobody ever, I say in that post, nobody ever sat me down and said, hey, what are your strengths? What are you good at? What do you like to do? Nobody ever did that until way later, but it did. Voc rehabilitation, when I said I was going into podcasting, they're like, okay, well, we don't know what to process this as because you're not a cookie cutter case. We can't
Right.
throw you somewhere. Um, so my advice to disabled people who are wanting to work, which I have a feeling the disabled people who do work are more in the entrepreneurial space than in the actual work sector, working for someone like Burger King or McDonald's. Uh,
Right.
I've heard that 80% of the disabled people who are working are having to start their own businesses, or parents have done that for their special needs kids because they had nothing to do after school. They were going crazy because the
Right.
world was school, home, school, activities, home. And so after that consistency change, some parents are like, what the hell are we going to do now? A lot of them have started businesses and put it in their kid's name. And now their businesses are affecting the world for good. And I'm a podcast now. I'm a podcaster now going into my second year, working with your same producer, Kyle Goodnight from Goodnight Podcasting Solutions. Um,
Right.
going into my second year, getting ready to take my uh probably when this episode airs, my 75th episode will have already been taped. And so I've had speaking engagements in front of caregiving agencies, other opportunities because I've had to take charge of my own life. And if
Right.
people with disabilities are going to take charge of their own life, they're going to have to realize that you're not going to want to take charge of the government. You're not going to want to take charge of your own life with the government still in charge of your finances. because
Oh, yeah,
you're still not taking charge of your own life.
right. So, Nick, with this episode, the way that I'm viewing it as we have people listening to us is it's really not about inspiration. This podcast is about bringing to light accountability
Absolutely.
and the accountability to employers who benefit from free labor.
Yeah.
Maybe they shouldn't be asking for volunteers. They need to be asking for someone to take a job. And then the workforce systems that confuse compliance with readiness, to the
Yeah.
nonprofits uh, and institutions that preach dignity while refusing to fund it. Kind of coming back to what you had just said a minute ago, and to financial systems that talk about inclusion but deny access to that earned income.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to be clear about something else, because I say something else in that blog post about the bar being on the floor. And I want to be very clear and strategic on how I bring this out, is that the reason why employers only offer us volunteer positions, in my opinion, is because when we were born, the bar was already put on the floor. I was told that I was going to be deaf, blind, severely mentally challenged. I wouldn't be able to sit myself up. I would never be independent. So, with my parents given all that information, they're like, okay, so this is going to be our life now. And
Right.
then when many of those diagnoses did not become true, my parents, like many other people, didn't know what to do with me, because God picked the bar up off the floor, gave it to me, and I rose it to a new height. And so
Right.
they didn't know what to do with that. And you know, for a lot of employers, the bar is still on the floor when it comes to people with disabilities. And they they don't just walk by, they step over the bar and they see the volunteer and they're like, oh, he's volunteering, she's volunteering. Well, at least they're in a good position. No, it's time for employers to pick the bar up off the damn floor, realize our potential, take a risk, just like you would with an able bodied employee, and see where it goes. And if it doesn't work out, guess what? Give somebody else with a disability a chance, because you
Right.
get that every time you fire somebody who's able bodied.
Right. Yeah, I love the way you said that, and it's in the nonprofit space or in the commercial business space. It's almost like we automatically start to think about what's another program we can put out there? What's another slogan that we can put out there? Well, that's not what you're talking about. It's what you're talking about is providing real jobs, real pay,
Yeah.
and ultimately real respect.
Real respect and real trust. Because I said at the beginning of this thing, they look at us, especially if we're physically disabled and it's noticeable, they look at us, and to them, we're already fragile, because
Right.
we have to put our trust in somebody else just to live our daily lives. You know, we have to put our trust in somebody else to get us to work on time. We have to put our trust in somebody else to, in my case, get us out of bed in the morning.
Right.
And that's why it's so important for home healthcare agencies to up their game as well. But employers can't. A pastor said to me, in a congregation one time, a pastor said, he told his daughter one time, you want me to tell you what to do, but I won't do that. And then he said, when his father in law was preparing for him to take over the ministry, he said, I will not let fear make my decision. And that's what a lot of these employers do when it comes to people with disabilities. They let the fear of the person with the disabilities instability make the decision on whether or not they'll be hired. Instead, we need to lean on each other, as the song says, if you need a friend, lean on me. And we need to figure out how can we make sure that this person who is ready and willing to work can get to work on time, can
Right.
have fair pay, make sure that somebody's at their house at 7 a.m. to make sure that they're at work by 9 a.m. How can I make sure that happens as an employer so that my company can thrive? Yes, it's going to require extra work. It's going to require extra sweat at the brow. But when you do that, trust me, you will not be sorry because, like I said earlier, people with disabilities are going to be your best workers, in my opinion.
Right. Well, Nick, I have so enjoyed our time together, and I am so honored to have you as a part of this community. And I thank you for naming what too many systems are trained to ignore. So, as we kind of start to wrap this up, just wanted to share that this restoration exchange, banking on humanity, is where we don't ask people to adapt to broken systems. Me personally, I am asking that we demand systems finally to honor the value that people bring by actually paying them.
Yes.
And your time is so valuable and very much appreciated. I also would like to thank Connie Davis at Unlocking Commerce in Business with Connie Davis, who is the enabler for us to have this conversation today and to do this podcast, and the wonderful talent that Kyle Goodnight brings with Goodnight Podcasting and all that he does to actually bring this session to life. So I wanted to share those thoughts. Also, is it okay if we end with a prayer today?
Absolutely. And before we do that, I want to give your listeners and your viewers an opportunity to, and I'll make sure that this is in your show notes, Janine. I would love everybody to come listen to my podcast. It's produced by the same wonderful producer, Kyle Goodnight. Goodnight Podcasting Solutions. My podcast is called Nick Speaks, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. If you're in the disabled community, whether you're an advocate, whether you are a parent with a disabled child, whether you've taught in the special education system, any part of the disability field that you're in, I would love to interview you, and I'm also available to be on other podcasts such as this one. So please reach out to me at nickspeaksofficial@gmail.com, and you can listen to my podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcast. I believe and Amazon Music as well. And you can find the Nick Speaks podcast on YouTube as well, just by typing in the Nick Speaks podcast. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, Nick, thank you so much. So may every word spoken through this work carry light to you, Nick, the person that's listening to us, and those who have lived in the shadows. May each story shared remind you of your worth and stir compassion in those with the power to give. May doors open, hearts soften, and resources flow where where they are most needed. And may you be sustained with strength, peace, and joy as you walk your journey, knowing you are never alone and that your labor is sowing restoration in you and for generations to come. Thank you for being a part of this community. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you.